Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Athens. We are doing pretty well with seating, but if you find that you've got a little space in the middle, you might sort of squeeze in a little bit to allow some latecomers to seat, just in case. Thank you. Thank you. I am the Reverend Allison Wilbur Eskildsen, the minister of this congregation, and this is the home where Nancy and Ray have chosen as their spiritual home. On their behalf, I thank you for coming today to share with them the celebration of Ray's life. And as evidenced by all the people that are with us this morning, we know that Ray touched many, many lives. I would like to begin by introducing some of the family who are with us today, especially those who have traveled quite a distance to join us. All of Nancy's 5 siblings have managed to come today. Alice Swift from Massachusetts, Janice Landro from Montana, Sue Edwards from Pennsylvania with her husband George and son, and finally brother David Carroll joins us from Washington State. Nancy and Ray's son Douglas and his wife Valerie and their boys David and Jason have traveled from Tennessee, while older daughter Rebecca and her husband and Steve and daughter Allison have journeyed from North Carolina. And younger daughter Kathleen is currently living in Athens, joins us as well. We are especially happy to greet those who came up from Louisiana, Ray's brother Wilmer and his wife Sally, as well as their daughter Rachel and grandson Matthew. Thank you for making that travel. Whether you are family or friend or colleague of Ray's, your presence today is a comfort. After the service, the MacNair family invites you to join them for a little reception in our fellowship hall, which is to the right of the sanctuary as you exit. And if you didn't have a chance to sign a guest book when you came in, we have a guest book on a table out in the foyer that you can sign as you head into the reception. It is the custom in Unitarian Universalist congregations that when we come together for some great purpose, that we light a chalice, the symbol of our faith. The shared cup of community and the light of truth and meaning that beckon us forward are just some of the symbols of the flaming chalice. And I'd like to invite Ray's grandchildren, Jason, David, and Allison, to come forward and light our chalice at this time. Thank you. Like the fingers of this flame, which stretch and reach up towards the sky, may we each stretch and reach out our hands in service to high ideals, ideals of justice and love, which guided Ray MacNair's life. To begin, I recite our affirmation. A human life is sacred. It is sacred in its being born. It is sacred in its living, and it is sacred in its dying. We gather together in the presence of death to honor the spirit of life. We gather to say farewell to someone well loved. And we gather to say yes to life's greatest expression, love. For love is a bridge between life and death. It is love which brings us together this afternoon to grieve Ray Hugh MacNair's death. We've lost not only a man we respected and loved, but a man who loved the world so deeply, he dedicated his life to bettering it. Our grief will continue into the weeks and months ahead, but today we remember and celebrate Ray MacNair. Today we will cry, but we will also laugh as we remember the spirit of this man. Gathering together in times of sorrow and in joy is what we humans do. We have done this throughout history and in every corner of the world. We come together to seek the meaning of a life and to comfort one another. We draw on our various faiths and traditions and on the wisdom which has been handed down to us across the ages. This is what helps us make sense of what seems senseless. The words we offer this morning cannot begin to cover all that Ray was or gave to this world, but in these words may we find comfort. Death is a mystery, and we will never fully understand it. We knew Ray was dying. We watched his body fail a little bit each day. But the end is never something we can be prepared for, because we know in our minds that each and every one of us will someday end our lives in death. We must let death heighten our awareness that our moment could come at any time. As we gather today to acknowledge death, let us give thanks for the gift of life we have been given. Let us pledge to live our lives fully. Let's sing about life and love and meaning. Please open and share a gray hymnal with your neighbor and rise in body or in spirit, and we'll sing verses 1, 3, 4, and 5. And for those sitting in the front row, the hymnals are under your seat somewhere. Around to share. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care. This was Ray's calling. Ray was a minister of social justice. He was wide awake with a vision of what the world could be. His entire being served the cause of love and justice. His convictions were his birthright. Ray UU MacNair was born on December 13th, 1937, in White Plains, New York, to the Reverend Everett MacNair, who was once employed at Talladega, a historic black college in Alabama, and Irene Taylor MacNair, both now deceased. Ray's surviving family includes a sister, Tina Hare, who couldn't be with us today, and a brother, Wilmer, who is also a minister, I believe. Is that right? Yes. By the time Ray graduated from high school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1955, he was already walking on a road to justice. Nancy and Ray met at Oberlin College in Ohio. It must have been kismet, for those two student activists met when seated on a bus ride heading to a peace march on the occasion of the Russian invasion of Hungary. Times don't change, do they? Each felt immediately comfortable with the other. They chatted together the entire trip and didn't stop once they'd arrived. Nancy laughed while recalling that during what was supposed to be a silent march, they kept whispering to each other. Clearly in sync, the pair founded the Oberlin Peace Organization. Ray became its president and Nancy its vice president. Founding this justice organization would not be Ray's last. Ray graduated from Oberlin with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology in 1959. After graduation, on June 13th, Ray and Nancy were married in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, Nancy's hometown. They immediately traveled to southern India for a 2-year postgraduate exchange program sponsored by the World Council of Churches. This program required them to return to Oberlin for another year to share some of their experiences with students. During this year, Ray completed a master's in sociology from Oberlin. From Ohio, the duo moved to Ann Arbor, where Ray mostly completed the requirements for a doctoral degree in social work and sociology from the University of Michigan. There in 1964, son Douglas was born. Daughter Rebecca arrived 2 years later. From the northern climes of Michigan, the family moved south to Tuskegee Institute, now University, in Alabama. Ray worked there as a researcher and professor and completed his doctoral dissertation while there. The family expanded during their 8 years in Tuskegee. Son Stephen, who preceded Ray in death last year, was adopted in 1969. In 1973, daughter Kathleen was adopted from Vietnam. Ray's instincts for new beginnings saw further expression in Tuskegee. He founded a social work program for undergraduates and served as its first director. Continuing his civic activism, Ray campaigned in 1972 for Johnny Ford, one of the 2 first black mayors ever elected in a city of over 10,000 in Alabama. In 1975, the family moved to Athens. At first, Ray split his time between the Institute of Community and Area Development and the School of Social Work at the University of Georgia. Classes he taught included community organizing, sustainable development, and environmental justice. Ray retired from the School of Social Work in 2003 as a tenured full professor with emeritus status. One of the many significant impacts that Ray had upon the UGA community occurred during the 5 years he served as the Director of Admissions for graduate students in the School of Social Work. He changed the application forms to reflect the growing racial diversity of the entering students. and Ray's faculty recruitment efforts also gained greater diversity for the school, since he drew some faculty away from some of Georgia's historic black colleges. Ray also worked to bring gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender diversity to UGA. Ray retired from the university not to sit back and rest on his laurels. Instead, he founded the Economic Justice Coalition and worked full-time, primarily writing grant applications to support the nonprofit's work. Most every Saturday, he could be found standing with day laborers, seeing that they were being treated well and being paid for their work. He never received a paycheck for this work. That was clearly not why he did it. Ray was passionate about justice work. His family actually used the term single-minded. They described Ray as a workaholic who, when the older children were young, maybe spent a little less time with the family than he might have. But Nancy volunteered that when Ray needed to focus on career activities, she took care of the family. And then when she returned to school and got busy with work, Ray stepped in to care for the kids. Ray became more of a feminist in later years and greatly supported Nancy's activism in women's health rights and sexual orientation issues. Nancy and Ray shared their love for social justice and activism with their kids. Ray taught his children to care about the underserved and the rights of workers. And they made him very proud because they live out his ideals in their own lives. Ray shared his love of running with his family, too. For 26 years, he ran the Peachtree Road Race. Say that 3 times fast. The Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta, running sometimes with his son Doug and grandson. Rebecca believed that her dad became more playful and more present for the family in his later years. She felt he was a devoted, affectionate granddad. Being a passionate environmentalist made the move to the Kenny Ridge community an obvious choice for Ray and Nancy. Nancy humorously remembered Ray's obsession with checking the house thermostat. He didn't want to use up any more energy than was necessary to heat or cool the house, and he made sure no one changed that setting. And yes, a Prius sits in their driveway. Ray's environmentalism was not limited to his home. He served on the Athens Land Trust Board and for a Kenny Ridge Eco-Technology Group. Ray also assisted the Children's Environmental Health Coalition, the Community Connection Organization, and other groups. Ray's environmentalism led him to become a vegan these last few years. He especially enjoyed eating vegetables raw because they didn't require any cooking energy. Since Ray was never really a fancy food enthusiast, his switch to a vegan diet wasn't too difficult, at least for him. Rebecca recalled how one Thanksgiving he made cheese, toast, and applesauce. She wasn't very enthusiastic about that. Nancy and Ray began attending the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship here in 1975. Ray enjoyed a good academic discussion of religious topics, but beliefs mattered little to him. Actions mattered. It's no surprise that Ray was most active with the fellowship's social action work. He deeply appreciated the shared commitment of his fellow UUs in wanting to change the world. When he wasn't marching or otherwise working for justice causes, Ray might be found outdoors. He loved to spend time in the mountains or rafting on the Chattahoochee River with friends and family. He loved watching the animals that paraded past the picture windows of his house. When deer pranced outside, Ray apparently danced inside. It was one way that he showed some of his playful nature. Just a few weeks ago, Ray noted seeing a pregnant doe in the woods. Sadly, he missed seeing the birth of her fawn a few days later. Ray told me he felt incredibly blessed to have had 3 funerals while he was still alive. Of course, they weren't actually funerals, but he was touched by people's outpouring of love and affection. Last January, after he shared a "This I Believe" statement during a worship service here, he received a standing ovation. Similarly, he was honored to be the first recipient of an Economic Justice Coalition Achievement Award in February. And he also received recognition when our fellowship's Social Action Committee dedicated its recent anti-poverty initiative in Ray's honor. Ray closed his "This I Believe" statement with these words referring to issues of poverty and low wages. "I believe that taking action is a spiritual journey when it is focused on promoting social justice. I cannot live without taking action on these types of issues." For someone physically active and whose life was dedicated to helping others, his physical decline was especially hard. Ray felt trapped in a non-functioning shell. Although ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, wrecked his body, Ray's mind remained sharp. He used modern technology to tap out words and phrases on his iPad until his muscles wouldn't take his own direction. Nancy had a cadre of health workers and Kenny Ridge and UU friends to assist her, but most significant help was daughter Kathleen, who moved back to Athens solely to help. Kathleen had an uncanny ability to understand and to anticipate Ray's every need. With great devotion, she massaged and relaxed his painful hands, feet, and leg muscles. She even raced behind Ray's scooter when he motored up and down the Kenny Ridge Road for a little fun and change of scenery. Sadly, Ray died on May 22nd. Ray's diagnosis and decline were a challenge to him and his family, made more so by the unexpected passing of son Stephen last autumn. And on the family's behalf, I want to thank all of you for your support and assistance then, now, and what will surely come in the days ahead. Ray was blessed with music during his illness. On several occasions, Umberto and Noe came to the MacNair house and shared some of their talents with him, as they have done so for our service today. And neighbor and friend Fiona also stopped by the MacNair house to sing to Ray, and she will now sing for us, accompanied by Maggie and Joe.
To legal and some are not wanted. Our work contract's out and we've got to move on. It's 600 miles to that Mexican border. They chase us like outlaws, like rustlers, like thieves. We died in your hills and we died in your desert. We died in your valleys and died on your plains. We died neath your trees and we died in your bushes. Both sides of the river, we died just the same. Goodbye to my Juan and goodbye, Rosalita. Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you will be deportees. The sky plane caught fire over Los Gatos Canyon. A fireball of lightning and shook all our hills. Oh, who are these friends all scattered like dry leaves? The radio tells us they're just deportees. Is this the best way we can grow our big orchards? Is this the best way we can grow our good fruit? To fall like dry leaves, to rot on our soil, and be called by no name except deportees. Goodbye to my Juan and goodbye, Rosalita. Adios, mis amigos, Jesus y Maria. You won't have your names when you ride the big airplane. All they will call you will be deportees. All they will call you will be deportees.
Thank you. Members of Ray's family would like to share a few words with us now, and I believe Doug is going to begin.
See if I can get through this. Very simply, I think of my dad as someone who knew a little bit to a lot about almost everything. He could start a conversation with anybody by asking a leading question and listening and learning together. So he also had a playful, silly side and brought people together and helped everyone laugh. And it was best captured by the following poem written by my wife Valerie. On a rock, surrounded by river, arms in the air, talking to the birds. Floating down the Chattahoochee River on a hot Atlanta afternoon, a semi-inflated raft, family and friends remembering the Peachtree Road Race from a few hours ago. A birthday cake for Doug, complete with candles. Ray MacNair, standing on a rock, balancing on one foot, arms waving in the air, calling to the birds nearby, making everybody laugh. On a topic, surrounded by people, arms in the air, talking. Long evening conversations about politics, about economic justice, about recycling, about equality. Ray asking questions about how can we reduce our impact on the earth. Living his passion to the point of not using the brakes going downhill in a Prius because it wastes energy. Asking why some people are treated differently than others. Going every Saturday to help day workers find jobs and ensuring they're properly paid. Sharing books with others, making everybody think. On a rock surrounded by a mountain, arms in the air, enjoying the birds. Unwilling to take the trail, scrambling up to the top of the mountain, surrounded by rhododendron blooming out bright pink, brambles catching shirts and jeans. Hard to keep up with because of daily physical exercise. Reaching the top to see the view out over the lake. Encouraging everyone to enjoy the outdoors. Maybe the time left has been shortened, making it harder to enjoy some activities. Wisdom, love, and strong convictions have been passed down to children and grandchildren, a tribute to a life given for others. But I will always remember Ray, on a rock, surrounded by river, arms in the air, singing with the birds.
My dad was the one who taught me to do sprints on the elliptical machine when we both had to stop running. He taught me to walk in the rain, and the harder the rain, the better the walk. And to swim long distances in lakes with your kids just to explore every little corner. And he taught us to care about the underserved, the poor, and the oppressed. And when he helped the day laborers outside of Home Depot with his friend George, who still brings the coffee and snacks, he lost his voice and he couldn't call the employers who had cheated their workers or dropped them off without pay after a hard day's work. And so he had to give that job to someone else. He accepted that change with grace and never complained. Many people who suffer from something as cruel as ALS will talk at some point about why they had held such a healthy lifestyle and then been afflicted with something so torturous. But even when frustrated, he never uttered a word like that, ever. Dad would want us today to honor and give thanks to Umberto, Armando, and of course Linda Lloyd, Dad's close friend and co-chair of the Economic Justice Coalition, who walked with him every step of the path. She told us that my dad was the one who helped her as an African-American woman learn to connect and work with Latinos and white folk at a whole new level. But the best thing that my dad gave us was a close and loving family, starting with my mom. His love for my mom, 53 years this month, would have been their anniversary. I feel like, how many kids get this? How many kids, I would walk around the corner and look in the kitchen and catch them hugging and kissing so sweetly. And my mom has been amazing in her ability to find peace and acceptance while caretaking nonstop for months and months now. She manages to have the wisdom to appreciate the little things in life through all this, to acknowledge how hard it's been, and to feel so grateful for good neighbors and for church support that has brought her out of her quiet shell a bit. My parents also gave me 2 brothers and a fabulous sister Doug, always the good guy who's doing the right things behind the scenes. He's a lot like my dad. Bringing home meaningful movies and starting family discussions to celebrate Dad's life while we still could. Doug, who now sometimes calls me on the phone just to chat, which never happened before. Steve, our loving and compassionate brother who was so bonded with us and so appreciated the parents he was given. After Steve died, we found a paper that he wrote for school, and he talked about the support he felt from my dad and how much my dad had given him at a time when he was in love with motorcycles and really needed a new outlet. And my dad took him to all kinds of motocross races, and it meant a lot to him. Kathleen, the two of them were extremely close. He got Kathleen on a deep, deep level and was so moved when she came home to help care for him. She is the most amazing, generous sister I could ever ask for, and she has given much, much more to our family than she could ever receive. So now our family is closer than we ever imagined possible. And that blessing, some of that has come from Dad's illness and from losing a son and a brother. And so we promise to keep this strong bond with each other, even though we miss you, Dad, more than you can ever imagine.
You're going to hear all these wonderful stories about my father and how he traveled here and he studied here and he got his degree here and taught here. But sometimes the simple things were tricky for him. When we were younger, I was running some errands with him on a Saturday afternoon, and he said, "Can we please stop by Wendy's? I want to stop by Wendy's and get a cheeseburger." And he said, "We still have some more errands to run." And he goes, "I'll drop you off at Wendy's and I'll come back and pick you up." You can see where this is headed, right? So I go inside and I order my cheeseburger, and I'm waiting, and I go outside and still no Dad, and eat my cheeseburger, still no Dad. So I go back inside and ask the manager if I can use their phone, because this is obviously before cell phones. And I called the house, and the phone rings a couple times, and my dad picks up the phone. And I'm like, "Dad," he's like, "Kat, where are you?" I'm like, "At Wendy's, where you dropped me off." When I was in middle school, I snuck out of the house, and of course I got caught. And my dad and I were going somewhere, and there was a song on the radio that came on, and it was called "Every Breath You Take," and it's by a group called The Police. And for those of you who are not familiar with the song, the chorus goes, "Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every smile you fake, I'll be watching you." And at the end of that song, my dad said, "You think of me every time you hear this song." And I still do to this day, and I've told that story 100 times. So my father also didn't like it when you used the word inconvenient. He didn't like that word. He didn't think that anything should be inconvenient. One summer he was hiking in the mountains, and he got a case of poison ivy on his arms, and it was during the summer, and I think he was teaching a class at the university, so he wore a long sleeve so not to gross the students out or whatever. And I saw him in the middle of the day, and he was showing like signs of being uncomfortable with wearing the long sleeve and having the poison ivy. And I looked at him, I said, "Dad, this is inconvenient, isn't it?" And he kind of lowered his head and nodded in agreement that it was, without actually saying the word, but agreed that it was. So anyways, I had moved back in the last, I guess at the end of March, to help with the care of my father, and it was one of the best decisions I'd ever make. And I want to thank my older brother Doug and my sister Rebecca for convincing me to move home sooner than I had planned. So, and just family is very important.
Thank you for those wonderful stories. Our meditation words will be followed by a time of silence for the prayers of your heart. and then we'll sing Spirit of Life. If you are not familiar with this particular hymn, I encourage you to go ahead and get out the gray hymnal and turn to 123 and just let the book rest in your lap in readiness. And you may remain seated when we get to that singing part. Our meditation words are by Howard Thurman. These are the same words we spoke for son Stephen's memorial, and they still seem fitting for Father Ray. I share with you the agony of your grief. The anguish of your heart finds echo in my own. I know I cannot enter all you feel, nor bear with you the burden of your pain. I can but offer what my love does give, the strength of caring, the warmth of one who seeks to understand, the silent, storm-swept barrenness of so great a loss. This I do in quiet ways, that on your lonely path you may not walk alone.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me. Come to me.
Four people who shared a particular time in Ray's life and career will now share some of their remembrances with us. Dr. Daniels, Dean of the UGA School of Social Work, will begin.
Good afternoon to Nancy and Doug and Rebecca and Kathleen and all of the loving family members, and certainly to all of you here today who loved Ray. I'm honored and humbled to say a few words to celebrate the life of Ray MacNair. And I say a few words. Let me hasten to say that I invited Ray to speak on many occasions, and he never said a few words. And that's due in large part to the fact that he was generally speaking about social justice or economic justice, and as has been said, and as you know, he was very passionate about that. So Ray could not contain himself. So although I'm committed to speak a few words, since I learned many important lessons from Ray, and in a sense he was my teacher, forgive me if I follow the example of my teacher. In reflecting on Ray's legacy, quite simply, he was the quintessential example of a community activist. He was the personification of a foot soldier for equal justice. He helped shepherd and guide the School of Social Work. In many ways, he was the conscience of our school. He was the conscience of this community in many ways. Ray was always about doing what was right. A great part of his uniqueness was that he was so ahead of his time. And it was mentioned earlier that Ray taught courses in sustainability development and environmental justice. I remember 20 years ago, I'd never heard of those terms. And Ray was giving me books to read about environmental justice and sustainability development, and he was pushing the school to offer courses in that area. And while we all accept and embrace those concepts today, Ray was there 20 years ago and really helped move us forward. He also helped this community move forward to embrace the needs and issues related to the Hispanic community. When many of us were singly focused on African Americans or what have you, Ray was pushing us to address economic justice issues in the Hispanic community. So he had great courage. And I said the other day that Ray had a high moral compass, and he did, but the distinction that Ray had was that he was willing to act on that moral compass. He literally was willing to get in the fight, so to speak. And in his quest to do what was right, Ray was willing to speak truth to power. And it didn't matter whether it was an officer of the law, it didn't matter whether it was the mayor of Athens, Clarke County, it didn't matter whether it was the president of the University of Georgia. It didn't even matter if it was the dean of the School of Social Work. I'm reminded of, I was offered the job to serve as dean by the president of the university and provost in 2005. I had been on the job about a week, and I knew Ray was coming by to congratulate me. And since he had been such a part of my career and played such a role in helping me to earn promotion and tenure, I was glad to see my longtime friend coming to congratulate me. Ray was not coming to congratulate me. Ray came to my office unannounced, barged right in, and he had a petition that he had just written to request, or maybe I should say demand, that the president of the university pay a living wage to all employees. I'd been on the job a week. And Ray wanted me to sign the petition. I said, Ray, I just got this job, man. I thought you were my friend. And if you know anything about Ray and his perseverance and persistence, when he left my office, he had my signature. The only solace I had was that if I lost my job, Ray was going to lead the protest march for me to get rehired. Ray also had, in a positive way, he had multiple identities. Ray was white, but he could be black. He could be Hispanic. He could be a feminist. In the School of Social Work, we had a black faculty caucus. I think at the time we had 5 members of the caucus. Whenever we were strategizing in the caucus that we were going to take an issue before the full faculty, we always had 6 votes. 5 black faculty members, and Ray. Right, Kathy? He believed in equal rights. He believed in diversity. I don't know that I ever met a person who was any stronger in his actions with respect to equality and rights than Ray. And perhaps my most memorable story about Ray was when I first joined the faculty of the University of Georgia as a young assistant professor. The dean advised me to focus on scholarship and publications. If you're going to earn tenure and promotion, you need to publish. Ray had other ideas. He said to me, if you're going to be relevant in the black community, that you need to get involved in community organizations. And I looked at him and I said, now, this white man is going to tell me how to be relevant in my community. It really didn't take very long for me coming to Athens to see why Ray could speak with such authority. He invited me to a meeting of the board of directors for the Athens Area OIC, which was a major community organization at the time focused on employment. There were about 15 members on the board, 14 black, and Ray. Ray was the chair. And these were some of the most prominent leaders in Athens, if not in our state. Howard Stroud, Doc Holmes, Homer T. Edwards, Clara Gay, many other very illustrious leaders of this community. But they had confidence in Ray because they knew his heart. And they knew that he was genuine. They knew that he cared. And so he provided great leadership to that organization and many others. And let me say in closing, Ray had a unique ability. And we teach students to reach across economic lines and gender lines and racial lines. Ray erased the lines and just went over into the other community. And the question can be posed, perhaps, how is it that this man, who some may have say grew up somewhat privileged, had an opportunity to be exposed to missionaries, certainly had a lot of great experiences as a child, how is it that he was able to so effectively work with diverse communities? I think sometimes you understand black people better than I did. And I think it can be summed up in a quote as I close by Dr. King. Dr. King said, to be a great servant, you don't have to have a PhD. Your subject and your verb don't have to agree. You don't have to know about Aristotle and Plato to be a great servant. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity or the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to be a great servant and a great leader. All you need is a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And Ray MacNair had a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Thank you.
And while Linda finds her way to the end of the pew, thank you, Dr. Daniels. And Linda Lloyd is someone who shared many hours with Ray. Come on. She's the director of the Economic Justice Coalition. Thank you.
Good evening. It is indeed a pleasure for me to talk about the memories of Ray MacNair. And I have to even pause when I say Ray because I'm thinking Dr. MacNair. Now, Ray and I met in 1979. He was my professor at the UGA School of Social Work. I never met anybody like Ray because, I'm from South Georgia. And of course, we got racism all over. But deep in the South, and where I'm from, black people were a majority. I would hear folks say that, that we were a minority, but it was only when I came to Athens and the University of Georgia that I saw that. I tell the story that for 2 weeks I didn't see a black person when I first came to University of Georgia. Probably some of that was because I was afraid to venture out. But anyway, my fond memory of Ray is in the School of Social Work, and I've told this story before, and that is when I was writing my thesis, he was my major professor. I used his instrument called the social functioning to evaluate black women in a county in Georgia, and I had to stay an extra quarter. All of my colleagues left me, and because I took on a thesis and my goal was to get a dissertation, and they told me that if I did a thesis that would give me that experience, but it takes longer because you got to go through UGA and all the research folks, and y'all know the whole deal. But Ray helped me. I had gotten so backed into that research, I had just hundreds of pages of I don't even know what now. But Ray took those pages and he thinned out my thesis and just brought me on home. And the thing that I think about Ray is that what folks say, and it's true, he was gentle. He was so caring. And like I say, being black from South Georgia, I'm just going to be honest with you. I never met a white man like that. I never did, until Ray. And so that got me. It even gets me now. That I have simply Nancy and the family falling in love with Ray MacNair. And the reason was because he was just so loving and so kind to people. When I met Ray again in 2003 with this economic justice coalition journey, and and I wrote this, we're doing stories on Ray and the flagpole, but I this hit me. Ray saved my life again. See, when Ray and I met, I was going through a workers' rights issue myself. That took me 10 years, I won, and of course it was taken back. But had Ray not been pulling me in to work on worker rights issues for other people, I would be bitter. And then too, I even questioned social work and that kind of thing, but you can't help when you see Ray, he's just always passionate, he's so excited, he wants to go to one more rally and one more meeting and, all of that, and you look at him, he's just like a little kid. In a candy store, he just jumps up and down at the rally. And you can't help but enjoy that, right? And the other thing, too, he taught me so much about people. Humberto and I, we are close friends. And all of this is because of Ray. Because now, I bought into that stuff about that Hispanic folks take our jobs. I bought into it. You couldn't help but buy into it because this is how we were talking. But to tell you the truth, Ray showed me and desensitized me really to the fact that, no one else would want to do these jobs, and that the Hispanic folks came over to America to better their family. And when you look at it like that, who would fault anybody that would come to better their families, because we would do the same thing. Now, Ray and I went on various trips. I was just thinking, we went in the search of economic justice. We went to Detroit, Michigan, and we went to North Carolina. We would just, travel. We went to Atlanta so many times, I just got tired of going. Like, Ray, we don't need to go up there no more. I was telling him, I think we are more evolved than the people that we were trying to get advice from with this living wage. We got our thing going on, and that kind of thing. And let me tell you something else about Ray. Ray didn't care what anybody said about him. Like, for instance, I'm just going to be honest with the day labor. We like, well, we don't know what they want you out there, man. They don't, sometimes, you know how people are when they don't trust you. And you just got to build up till they trust you. You think Ray paid us any mind? Went back every Saturday. And then next thing we know, he was taking us out there for the barbecues and the whatever. But the thing that I really want to say, Ray, we love Ray. All of us love Ray. And he really is our hero. And I tell him, I said, Ray, I said, you my hero. He said, you my shero. It's like he wouldn't let you give him a compliment. Sometimes he would hide from you if you start complimenting him. And so Ray was really this person, what they say is if you can do the thing you want to do, if you don't be concerned about who gets the credit. That's Ray. He didn't care who get the credit. And sometimes I had to talk to him and say, Ray, we're trying to push this economic justice coalition thing up. Now we got to put our name on this. And that kind of thing, because he had done most of the work. Now this is what I'm thinking about Ray. Because at the end, all we had was love. Because he had projected such love, and he got that back. Till at the end, I knew what kept him going, and it was love. And I'm going to end, because see, Ray had God in him, okay? When I think about everything, he didn't have to talk about God. Now, he researched God and the Bible, he pulled all the verses out of there where it shows that we should treat workers right. He did that. But he had God in him. Okay, and this is what I can hear. I'm going to end. What I hear is God saying to Ray, well done, Ray. My good and faithful servant. Thank you.
Ray and I share some long trips to different social forums and gatherings and workshops. The last one was last year, and to Chicago. He drove 2 days up and 2 days back to Athens, and his peers. And all these gatherings, we talk a lot. We don't do nothing but talk. And I did learn to love this beautiful human being. So to speak to someone which is dying in front of the people who cares about him and who he cares about, I thought I need to say something remarkable, something novel about. But in the case of Ray MacNair, that is very, very easy. There is so many things, good things I can say. I witnessed it about Ray. I think the hard thing is say something bad or something no good about something dark. And I was thinking about if I remember something obscure, something bad about Ray, and I never find nothing I can share with you. Even though with the people who was around Ray, I never heard nothing negative, really, or dark. Maybe the dark thing about Ray was his sense of humor. And the worst thing about that is that some of the jokes I could not understand really. The thing, the language, English is such a language, especially if you are not young or you don't grow up in this society. And Ray knew that. Ray knew about that because he tried to speak Spanish. And when they try to say muchas gracias, which means thank you so much, he say much grass. He always shake the hands of the people on Home Depot, the day laborers. At the time he arrived, he shake the hands of them, and at the time he leave, he shake the hands of the day laborers, and he share with them, even though he doesn't speak Spanish, and some of them they speak little English, but anyway they manage to communicate. But the language we both, Ray and I, speak is the language of justice. And Ray was expert speaking the language of justice, that eternal language that is flooding the street with protests and marches, like at the Day Labor Day in downtown Athens, which Ray and Economic Justice Coalition organize every year. Speaking this language, the justice, Ray makes some politicians uneasy. Ray knew this language is censored and banned for the oppressed. Then he shared with the oppressed, he shared with us, and he enriches us with his sense of humor, and which stays with us as his great legacy to our community. I like to share some quotes from some Latino members, people from the community. Lalo, who is a day laborer at the Home Depot, he said that Ray was always a great collaborator with the cause of immigrants. Roberto Levy, who is an organizer, a Latino community organizer, who born as me with Ray in 2006 on the big march in Athens. He said that Ray was a great model to follow. He was a fair American and humble. And finally, Leopoldo, who is a day laborer, say, he left us great teachings, a man who understood the needs of the undocumented, a man who faced the consequences in the process to improve our situation in the workplace without any monetary interest. We are very sad for this great loss. We will remember everything he did for us. We know that he is still alive in our hearts, and we will keep his teachings to continue fighting as an angel of God who cares. He was a great man. Never we forget you, Dr. Ray, my friend. Ray MacNair. Much gracias. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Stu Foers, and this is my wife, Kay. And our remarks today are a combination of what I consider our best efforts to think about Ray and his family and all the wonderful experiences we've had with them over the years since we've known them. Kay and our two kids, Eric and Meredith, have known MacNair since we moved to Athens in 1979. And we count them among our best friends ever. I'm wearing black today because I grieve for the tragic loss of our dear friend Ray. But I'm also wearing this rainbow stole in memory of Ray because it represents all the wonderful and beautiful aspects of his life. There's no need for me to go over all the good works he accomplished for social justice because you know or have read about those. I'm going to talk with you briefly about Ray, not as a colleague or a co-worker, but as a good friend. My comments most likely will include some little-known facts about Ray that may surprise and or amuse you. Since 1979, our family has had some great times with the MacNairs, and I'd like to highlight some of those featuring Ray, and Kay will add to some of those comments. Ray was a good and gentle man, but as we read these, remember, no one is perfect. Two aspects of Ray's life usually caught our attention: his interesting dietary habits and his exercising. Seemed like he always was trying something new as far as eating, which at the time he felt was the healthiest diet he could have. Well, what's next? Kay and I would ask. He announced to us a couple of years ago that he decided to become a vegan. For many years prior to that, he had been making up a strange concoction as his final snack of the day, which, for lack of a better phrase, we termed wallpaper paste because of the texture and the way it looked.
I'd like to insert something here, is that he would be at 10 o'clock having this paste, and Nancy and I would be on our first or second dessert.
I never did learn really what was in it, and frankly, I didn't want to know. We developed a tradition of running or jogging in the peach tree, which some people had already mentioned, on July 4th each year. And we did this for over 20 years. We'd stay in Atlanta the night before and have a nice dinner with many of our family members, including our kids. And then we'd run or jog the peach tree, and then we'd tube the hooch with a picnic lunch in the afternoon. But no matter where we were, Ray would be up in the morning, stretching, running in place, and wondering who was going to go out with him. Well, many times there were no takers, but off he would go to return in about an hour or so. Didn't matter how warm or cold it was, he was ready to go. And he really liked to walk and hike the area near the Appalachian Trail in North Georgia. And sometimes he'd go by himself on unmarked routes. One time he was pretty late coming back to the condo, and we began to worry. But when he returned, he said he'd just gotten lost for a little while.
Another aside, I think Douglas mentioned in the Valerie's about his going up one side and coming down the other, and another, there really wasn't a trail. I did one of those with him, and he sort of take the same route going up to the top of his mountain, but you never come down the same way. And I kept saying, why don't you just mark it? You know, just take spray paint or a little piece of plastic thing and tie it around a tree, and then we know where we're going. Oh, no, take the fun out of that. So we'd go up there, and then we would start down. And like I said, it was never the same way. And I'm one of those who ruined an entire pair of jeans and one of my favorite walking shirts because I slid down halfway on my backside. And he just thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Ray was also a good swimmer, and he swam on the swim team in high school. And he often demonstrated this at Lake Chateau or when he was body surfing with all the gang down at St. Augustine. But he was always very careful to not expose his skin to excessive sun rays. So he would head back up to the condo unit, and he usually kept himself out of trouble up there by reading 2 or 3 books at a time. And if it wasn't the books, he was busy with his laptop, reading social justice or health articles on the web or communicating with his coworkers via email.
For at least 20 years, maybe longer, the four of us would celebrate our birthdays. We had a December, April, July, and October birthday. And it was always an adventure because when we would get to the restaurant, of course, the first thing they would do is, what can we bring you to drink? Water, no ice. And maybe that was part of his saving electricity. You wouldn't have to spend... I mean, he was way ahead of his time on that one. And of course, restaurants in this country do not know how to bring you a glass of water with no ice. So it would always end up with several, pieces of ice, and we'd get a spoon and would dip the ice out of his drink. Okay, and then Nancy would order wine. Ray never ordered wine, and he never ordered dessert, but he always managed several spoonfuls off of Nancy's dessert and a couple of sips of her wine. And also, we would start these wonderful conversations. A lot of it was a little small talk at the beginning, and then as other speakers have said, immediately he flies into something really serious. And we're going, what? You know, where did that come from? And he had read some book, and he brought up some huge issue. And one of them was something about being a goddess. Okay, are you a goddess? And I said, I don't think so. And then he'd give me the history of goddess theory. And so it was always an interesting evening with Ray and Nancy, especially Ray with his kind of off-the-wall discussions of very deep subjects, but it was always a head-whipping, you know, where'd that come from?
The four of us also had developed a tradition of celebrating New Year's up at Ray and Nancy's condo at Lake Chautauqua. We'd have a nice dinner out, and then we'd watch the celebrations around the world on television till it was our turn. We'd pop some champagne and then go out on their deck and listen to and watch the fireworks. Ray wanted to be heard, however, so he would start whistling. His whistle, bar none, was the loudest I have ever heard, and it echoed all over the lake, and I'm sure he turned a number of heads when they wondered where was all that noise coming from. He was very interested in the environment, as you've heard, and he and Nancy had a Prius as one statement about their concern about fossil fuels and the environment. But Ray tended to drive very slow, as you also heard, to save gas or electricity, whatever seemed to be the thing that was on at the time. His goal on the open road was 60 miles per gallon. And one story that gives us a chuckle is that one time he and Nancy were meeting us down at our condo in St. Augustine, and they left an hour or two before we did. Now, they lived at Kenny Ridge, which is fairly close to Athens, and then we left from our Athens house. They left an hour or two before we did. Just south of Jacksonville on I-95, Kay and I passed them.
But he was getting 65 miles on his per gallon, or 60 miles per gallon.
And we arrived at our condo way before they did. We have so many wonderful memories of our special times with Ray, Nancy, and our families. And I could go on for hours, but not today. Today we're here to celebrate the life of Ray MacNair, a man who walked the walk and talked the talk. A man whose mission in life, other than his dedication to his wife and family, was to advocate for and promote social justice. As Ray's health deteriorated, it became difficult or impossible for him to respond to Kay and I when we visited them. I'd look him in his eyes, and I'd tell him we knew he could hear and understand us. We told him that we loved him, and we wished him peace.
Go ahead.
Ray, my friend, we miss you, we'll always love you, and we'll never forget you.
And Ray, wherever you are, I wish you had had more desserts.
Wonderful stories, wonderful sharing. The MacNair family would like to provide a brief opportunity for anyone else present here to say a word or two. And I suggest that I will bring a microphone to you if you wish to say something. And just keep it brief, but share as you wish.
My name is Carol Sunland, and Ray was a very special friend for me. He's the kind of guy that always had something for me to do and get involved with, and he was really hard to turn down. So there are many things we do together, demonstrations, the Economic Justice Coalition, and many other social justice causes.
My name is Clotilda Barnett, and I have fond memories of Ray, and I listen to everyone, and when I hear them, it makes me smile to think of all the time that I have spent with Ray, and I can say, oh yeah, I remember that. And when Linda was speaking, and she talked of how they balanced each other, and I thrived off of both of them. And I will miss Ray.
I'm Jim Porter, and I'm a co-faculty member with Ray at the University of Georgia, but I'm in the sciences, and he asked me to guest lecture in his environmental justice. And with the example I gave, he said, Jim, pursue it. Change what you do. Get out of the laboratory. And I have done that. And I'm now working on environmental justice in Vieques, Puerto Rico, very much because of Ray.
My name is Jerry Maritia Cleveland, and I'm originally from Kenya. And I met Ray about 8 years ago when he invited me to talk about environmental justice issues at one of his classes. And he was very interested to learn about how Wangari Maathai and other people from Kenya were working towards issues of environmental justice. I had another privilege of working with Dr. Ray about 4 years ago. I had a grant where I brought women from Kenya to the University of Georgia to an exchange funded by the U.S. State Department. And I invited Dr. Ray to talk to both groups. We had two groups of Maasai women from a nomadic community in Kenya, visited Georgia for 3 weeks. And Dr. Ray talked about issues of grassroots organizing. The Maasai community is a very small nomadic group that has a group whose women are behind everybody else when it comes to issues of empowerment, political participation. So they needed to learn about how they could organize their community. And we invited Dr. Ray to talk to them. He talked to both groups. I have wonderful pictures of Dr. Ray with Maasai women that I would be very happy to share with the family. And I know it's a great loss, not only to the community here, but the international community. I think it transcended those boundaries when it came to issues of justice. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Joel Isler. I'm a recent graduate of the School of Social Work. Just got my MSW. I never got to have a class with Ray, but I did work with him in the streets, I should say, with the Economic Justice Coalition and Free IT Athens. And I can say that his work has inspired me. His ideas will live on with me in my future work as a social worker, and I appreciate his life and his work.
My name is Armando Tasistro, and I enjoyed Ray's friendship for many years, and I learned a lot, and I value everything that we did for the community together, and it would be very difficult for me to express now what it means, his loss means to me. I would like to just say, paraphrase really what playwright Bertolt Brecht, German, said many years ago, that there are those who fight one day and they are good. There are those who fight several years and they are necessary. But then there are those who fight all their lives, and those are indispensable. And Ray was indispensable.
Hi, I'm Skipper Stipe-Moss, and many years ago, I was at a meeting in Atlanta in the governor's office, and I got called out of the governor's office to talk to someone on the phone, and the person on the phone was the mayor in Athens. And Ray had organized a protest in downtown Athens, and the mayor wanted me to stop Ray. And my response was, "You can't stop Ray." And the mayor's response was, "Why can't you stop Ray?" And I said, "Because Ray is right."
Hello, my name is Mildred Lyle, and I'm a graduate of School of Social Work, BSW and MSW. It was when I applied to the graduate school, my admission was denied. But Dr. MacNair said, "Do you really want to go to grad school?" And I said, yes. And he said, "We can appeal the process." And so he led the committee in appealing that process, and that was just very special to me. I'm really saddened by his passing. He was really, truly a great person. And just doing that for me and countless others, he has just said yes to their desire to do something just really special.
I'm George Patrick, and I've worked with Ray on Saturday at the Day Laborers Center for almost 5 years now, every Saturday except about 2. And we got a chance to know each other pretty well, and we collaborated and cooperated, and I learned a lot. And I learned that the important part was that the part that I'm having to take over now, that Ray is gone, is the wage theft issue. And so I've been to court once, and to the sheriff's office another time, and we try to continue to seek out those people who have been cheated from their wages. And it's not regular, but it's egregious whenever it happens. And I guess he passed the ball to me, and I got it.
I'm Jim Godden, and I was a faculty colleague of Ray's. We came to Athens in 1979, a few years after Ray and Nancy did. But I remember when we came, Ray and Nancy were the ones that reached out to us and welcomed us, invited us over for dinner, and got us to know some other people here in Athens. And when I first came to the faculty, Ray said, "You're interested in some research?" And I said, "Sure." And so he was doing some work with Clayton County Department of Family and Children's Services, and he said, "Come with me, I'm going to go down there, and there's some research, that they need to have done." So I said, "Okay, well, I'll go with you." So we went down there and met with the director, and she had this research that she wanted to do. She had some program that they had carried out, and she wanted me to do some research to prove that their program had reduced the unemployment rate in Clayton County. And I said, "Well, yeah, but there may be a few other variables in that equation. I'm not sure I could do that, So we didn't ever do that research, but Ray got me involved in some things, and he and I were great colleagues. Ray was always an example. He was often a voice crying in the wilderness in faculty meetings, and people would kind of shake their heads and say, what's he talking about, But Ray was always challenging the faculty about things, that justice issues that we should deal with. When I think of Ray, I think of somebody who didn't identify as being a Christian, but he was the man that I know that carried out the Christ command to love one another to a tremendous extent.
Janice Ford, and from hearing all these accolades, I'd like to say our world is a better place because Ray has passed our way.
This is just the beginning. You have many stories more to share, and I hope you will continue to share them, not only during the reception afterwards, but ongoing. Please turn once again to your gray hymnal or a lyric sheet if you happen to have that, and rise in body or in spirit, and we'll sing, "We Are a Gentle, Angry People."